Are you kidding me? Another airplane crash? Guys, this one was in Toronto. Now, at least the good news is that nobody died, but this is a very serious airplane accident and it left a Delta connection CJR 900 upside down on the runway at Toronto Pearson International Airport. Now, the question is, how in the world does an airplane end up belly up, upside down after landing? So guys, this is what I want to cover in today's video. If you haven't already, please take a second, hit the like button for the video. Thanks so much for subscribing. And a lot of people are already asking, is there some conspiracy theory behind this? Because we're at number 4. This is the fourth airplane accident since President Donald Trump's inauguration. And so many people are wondering, what's the connection here? Now, this was Delta Flight 4819, operated by Endeavor Air, flying from Minneapolis, St. Paul, MSP, to Toronto Pearson, YYZ, on February 17, 2025, yesterday, less than 24 hours ago. In fact, this is still breaking news as they're still currently investigating the situation, but the airplane crashed at approximately 2:45 p.m. local time. Now, the plane, it's a Bombardier CRJ 900. It was carrying 76 passengers. It had a crew of 4 members and ultimately 80 people in total. The scary part here, guys, is that after the landing, the aircraft flipped over, breaking off its wing and its tail section and briefly catching fire. Now, a lot of people were initially looking at the photographs of the airplane upside down, and people believed that the airplane had landed upside down. But what had actually happened, according to reports and according to the video that I'm going to show you guys in just a little bit, is that the aircraft actually flipped over after it had already landed. Now, miraculously, everyone survived. Thankfully, thank God. Please type amen in the comments, guys. However, 18 people were unfortunately injured, with 2 people in critical condition, and this included a child. Now, fortunately, reports are already coming out saying that the injuries are not life-threatening, so that's very good. Someone was watching out for these folks on this plane. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know what you guys believe, but that's what I believe. Anyway, emergency responders, they were on the scene immediately, and you can see that they were quickly putting out the fire. They're helping passengers evacuate safely. Some of the first videos from passengers are actually showing them walking away from the overturned aircraft as fire crews douse it with water and foam. And I mean, this is just really so wild. The only example I can think of right now, and maybe you guys can help me out with this in the comments, but the only other example that's kind of like this is the situation we saw in and they ended up making a movie out of it, where an aircraft landed in the Hudson River in New York City. I think Tom Hanks ended up being a star in that movie. Anyway, if you guys could help me out with the title of that movie, that would be great. But a lot of folks are wondering, how could this have happened? What could have caused this aircraft to flip upside down? And after this landing, like, how does a plane just flip over like this? It doesn't make any sense. Well, it turns out that this is not completely unheard of. So there was a similar crash in Somalia back in 2022 when a plane landed very hard and its wing tip hit the ground. And when that happened, it ended up flipping over, kind of like what we're seeing here. But let's look at the conditions that were in Toronto at the time of the crash that led up to this. So we have audio reports as well as written reports. And of course, we're still waiting for the FAA to do their official diagnosis investigation to let us know exactly what happened. They need to review the black box that's on the aircraft, but strong winds were reportedly coming out of the west at 27 knots, gusting up to 35 knots. The runway was actually covered in light snow. And as you guys can see from the footage that we have shared, the runway actually looks like it may have actually had some ice on it. That's what it looks like, but there was definitely, the runway was definitely covered in light snow. Temperature was -8 degrees Celsius. And so the runway condition was rated as a 5 on a scale of 0 to 6, with 0 being the worst and 6 being the best. So the last part is very important. A 5 means that the runway is usable. It's just not that ideal, with some snow accumulation, and parts of the runway, was the parts of the runway width was ultimately reduced due to some snowbanks. But here's the real kicker, guys. The CRJ 900's maximum demonstrated crosswind limit is only 32 knots on a dry runway. But at the time of this crash, the winds were gusting up to 35 knots. And so the runway was not exactly dry, and it was snowy and possibly icy. So after touching down, the aircraft lost control. It flipped over, and it essentially broke apart, snapping its wing and its tail section. So ultimately, there's footage from passengers and airport cameras that actually show the wreckage upside down, with emergency crews quickly responding to attempt to extinguish the fire that had ignited on the aircraft's tail. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're one of the real ones who really enjoy what we do here on the channel, you've got to check out the Inner Circle. This is where our true supporters get exclusive access to content that I just can't share here, completely commercial free. It's also the best way to keep this channel going strong. So if you want to be a part of something special, join us over there. Links in the description or in the pinned comment down below. So the first responders, they're super quick. They were Johnny on the spot, immediately out there. The first responders helped passengers evacuate safely. And so, again, this is the 4th plane crash since President Donald Trump's inauguration. And this is just really interesting. There was another plane crash in Washington, D.C., where, it involved the American Airlines crashing into or colliding with a Black Hawk helicopter. And ultimately, President Trump came on, and his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, had confirmed that the helicopter had been flying hundreds of feet too high, should have pulled away. And there are a number of different reasons that were indicated for that particular crash. But it's just really odd how frequently this is happening. And a lot of people are wondering, is it even safe to travel by air anymore? Like, is it, should we cancel our upcoming vacations because of this? It's really scary what's going on. But the question is, could wind have flipped the plane upside down? So let's go ahead and break this down a little bit, right? So you got the runway. The runway direction was 230 degrees, runway 23. The wind was coming in from 270 degrees, which means that there was a 40-degree crosswind that was hitting the plane as it landed. And I've actually been on a plane when it has to kind of land in a fashion that's really not direct. It almost looks like the airplane is drifting into a landing. It is really scary. And if I were wearing a hat, I would definitely tip it to the flight crew, to the flight captains, to the pilots, to the co-pilot. Absolutely amazing and a masterful skill set to be able to land in those conditions. But what made this one even tougher is that the surface of the runway, it wasn't ideal. There was ice, or there was definitely some light snow, possibly ice patches. The crosswind landings they're already tough. But if a sudden gust of wind hits the plane at the wrong moment on top of these crosswind landings, this literally could have tilted the wing, causing it to strike the ground, which is exactly how the plane crashed in Somalia. And so if you add to the fact that you have a runway that has snow and or ice on it, this is almost an impossible landing. So there was clearly some act of God here that helped these folks make it off of this plane alive. So now, if this is what happened here, once the wingtip hit the ground, the plane's momentum could have easily flipped it over. And if we add to the fact, in a slippery runway, it makes even more sense why the pilots might have struggled to control it. Now, authorities will now ultimately be focusing on how exactly did this plane flip upside down. Given the 40-degree crosswind at the landing, investigators are going to be examining whether the wind maybe was a little bit too strong for the CRJ 900's crosswind limits. Additionally, there's factors such as pilot response, runway conditions, mechanical issues that will be analyzed. Of course, the FAA is going to likely look at air traffic control. Did we have all of the qualified workers working the air traffic control towers? Should air traffic control have requested that the pilots land at a different airport? Should air traffic control have signaled to have on-site on-prem service to service the runway before the landing? There's a lot of things that are definitely going to be analyzed post accident. So the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the TSB, is leading this investigation with assistance from the United States National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. As per the International Aviation Protocols, the ICAO Annex 13. So, is this happening more often? Is the question that I keep hearing, and it's definitely the question that I'm thinking. I feel like it definitely feels like it's happening more often, and it definitely feels like the frequency, at least in the recent last several weeks, is higher, right? This is the second CRJ crash in just a month. The first one happened in Washington, D.C., involving American Airlines CRJ 700, which ultimately, unfortunately, did result in fatalities then. But while the CRJ 900 has historically had an excellent safety record, only 2 total losses since its 2003 debut, with no major fatalities. So it's got a great track record. Think about it. Only 2 total losses since 2003. And of course, these recent crashes will likely bring renewed scrutiny to the aircraft's performance under challenging conditions. And we would hope so, because after each accident happens, the FAA and the NTSB and all the different controlling bodies, governing bodies, they do a thorough analysis to understand how these things have happened in order to prevent future undesirable events like this from happening in the future. People are wondering if plane crashes are suddenly now becoming more common. But experts say it's more about how fast news spreads today. Now, I don't know what you guys believe, but I'm just saying every one of these accidents that we're talking about here have taken place after President Trump's inauguration, and I just find that incredibly odd. I don't know about you guys. Now, the last fatal crash in the United States before the DC accident was almost 15 years ago. So commercial air travel technically is still incredibly safe, especially when you consider how many accidents happen on the road and people don't walk away from them. So the question now that people are wondering is like, well, okay, well, what's going to happen next? Well, according to the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the TSB, is leading this investigation with the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, assisting them. And so they're going to be looking at a number of different things. They're going to look at the weather conditions at the time of landing. They're going to be looking at the pilot decision-making skills. Did they have a choice to divert? Possible mechanical failures, maybe. Whether air traffic control played a role in this. Any history of issues with this particular CRJ 900. So definitely a number of factors are going to be considered in this investigation. But at the end of the day, despite the numerous concerns that are coming in from the public, from me, from you guys, and let me know where you guys are watching from. Do you have confidence in flying right now? Or do you think that this is just a rare coincidence and it's unlikely to happen if you were to fly? Let me know, guys. But again, experts are emphasizing that air travel remains the safest mode of transportation, even in light of these recent incidents. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm landing, I always I don't care if I was sleeping the whole flight, the moment I'm realizing, hey, we're about to land, my eyes are glued out the window. Not like I can I could help the plane if we were having any kind of incident, but I can't help but look out the window and ultimately admire the skills of the pilots for landing a plane. Even in ideal conditions, I think landing a plane is just, it's a marvelous execution. But then when we add these increased challenges such as wind, gusts, runway conditions, possible mechanical failures. I mean, there's just all sorts of things that pilots have to deal with. And each of these pilots is not just, responsible for their own life, but they're responsible for potentially hundreds of lives on the plane. So, my greatest respects go to these pilots out there, and the parents that raised them. Anyway, so the last crash that was fatal in the United States was before the DC accident. That was like 15 years ago. But of course, the increasing speed of social media, global news coverage, it does make these incidents seem a little bit more visible, definitely more visible. But statistically, they're saying that flying is still far safer than driving a car. I don't know if you guys agree, but that's what they're saying statistically. Now, for now, the biggest takeaway is that this could have been a whole lot worse. And, I'm grateful that it wasn't, amen for that. Right, guys? So appreciate the quick response from the emergency crews and everyone making it out alive. This is definitely a very concerning incident, but thankfully everyone made it out alive. And that's just truly incredible if you think about it, especially when you look at the video, right? After investigators worked to, figure out exactly what went wrong, one thing is very clear. These strong winds and tricky landing conditions, they have definitely pushed this plane a little bit past its limit. So let me know your thoughts, guys. What are your thoughts? Do you think that the pilots should have tried to land in those conditions? Or do you feel like maybe the pilot should have diverted and tried to land at a different airport? Or let me know your thoughts. Hit me up in the comments. Thanks so much for hitting the like button and subscribing. We'll see you next time.